Welcome in, Whiskey Freaks. It's the Blind Tasting Podcast, your number one attitudinal bourbon destination. I'm John Stark, your host, as always. And today I'm going to bring you some whiskey news. I'll give you my opinion on a few things, as always. But we're not going to be doing any reviews today. Sorry about that. There'll be, I just did one not too many days ago on George Washington's rye whiskey. Go back and check that one out if you missed it. Going to be doing something cool with Maker's Mark in a few days too. So keep your eyes peeled. Always tune into the pod. Make sure you subscribe on the things. Most everybody's on Apple or iHeart or Spotify. And remember, we're on Amazon too. I've got a small presence on YouTube, but most of you guys don't pay any attention to YouTube. Honestly, I don't do video, but all the audio is dropped on YouTube. So wouldn't hurt for you to go ahead and subscribe on YouTube too. That helps out me, helps out the algorithm, you know, the secret algorithm. Anyway, earlier today, I was doing some research for the podcast today. Believe it or not, I actually do research for this sometimes, depending on what I'm talking about. And I was cranking out to some Rush. Yeah, that Rush. And for those of you under the age of 40, whatever generation that is, that's a rock band. 3 Canadian dudes, 0 choreography, whole lot of drums. And Neil Peart, how the hell do you say it? Neil Peart, anyone? We always said Peart back in the day, but I think the correct pronunciation is Peart. And you older dudes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Crazy long, like 8-minute songs. Guitar and drum solos that absolutely shred, specifically the drum solos, and lyrics that sound like they were written by a philosophy major. Anyway, Tom Sawyer came on, and it kind of stopped me in my tracks. There's that line, though his mind is not for rent, don't put him down as arrogant. Okay, yeah, no, we're not going to. Though his mind is not for rent, don't put him down as arrogant. His reserve, a quiet defense, riding out the day's events. Now, this isn't a poetry class today, guys. It's also not a philosophy class, but this struck me. And I thought, damn, that's kind of how I feel some days when I do this podcast or when I get feedback on the podcast. Look, guys, I've got opinions and you know I've got ideas. Some of them crazy, some of them interesting, some of them, maybe cutting edge, right? And that reminded me, good old Vlad again. Remember Vlad? That rat bastard Vlad? Yeah. He once called me arrogant on here, which, all right, fair enough. Maybe I can come off that way sometimes. But the truth is, I'm not sitting here pretending that I've got all the answers as it relates to the bourbon world. I'm just a regular dude, and I'm really just humbled to be here doing all the things and sharing with all y'all. My mind is not for rent, but that doesn't mean I'm talking down to anybody. And look, I know I go off on tangents. I wander, I chase squirrels, and that's just how my brain works sometimes. It's just me being me. And I know this whole little bit here is cheesy or whatever, but I really do want to say this sincerely. Thank you all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking with me through the rants, the side roads, the occasional overthinking of stuff. I've been accused of overthinking things from time to time. It honestly means more than you probably realize, guys. And so I want to give a round of applause to all y'all whiskey freaks. All right. Enough deep thoughts and ass kissing. Let's get on to the bourbony goodness. Because I got all kinds of things to throw your way today. And we might just learn something while we're at it. Sazerac. Sazerac has taken over the world in only the way they can, or at least another corner of the world anyway. And I've got a pro tip for those of you who are taking the wives to the Bourbon Trail. Trust me, guys, you'll want to hear this one. And I asked you all to pick your least favorite bourbon. I gave you 4 choices, 4 big names, 4 bourbons for that matter, And y'all didn't let me down. I got big responses, and I'm going to break it all down for you here on the podcast today. And finally, this is probably my coolest moment in a while for me. I had the honor, I had the pleasure, and quite frankly, I kind of got up my nerve, to ask Mr. Fred Minnick, you know, that Fred Minnick. I got to ask him a question the other night at his book tour and tasting that we did here in St. Louis. Now, I did it respectfully. I asked him a question that's been bugging me, and I know it's been bugging a lot of other folks because I've been talking with other folks about this particular thing. And it's about his 100 top whiskeys list that he puts out every single year. Everybody knows the list. If you don't know the list, go to fredminnick.com. There's the damn list. You can see it. And I got to say, Fred was gracious enough to actually take my question and explain. And I want to share that with all y'all today. So here's the deal. Sazerac has advanced yet again on their bid for world domination, and they're entering an exclusive sales and distribution agreement with Piedmont distillers for Midnight Moon moonshines and moonshakes. So now they're into moonshine. Now this deal puts the fast-growing moonshine and liqueur brand under the Sazerac distribution umbrella, with Sazerac handling sales efforts moving into the future. And according to Sazerac CEO Jake Wentz, the company plans to help Midnight Moon continue its recent growth and unlock even more opportunities through the relationship. Okay, so Midnight Moon basically now joins the steadily growing list of brands tied to Sazerac through sales and distribution agreements. It's kind of the way they're growing their portfolio or their reach right now. Now, that list already includes Red Tree Brands, which covers non-alcoholic, and that's a big thing, non-alcoholic heavy hitters like Minute Maid. Didn't know that, did you? And Fresca. Because Sazerac isn't just limiting its ambitions to whiskey anymore. Now, this latest move, it adds to an already massive Sazerac portfolio that includes Buffalo Trace Bourbon, as you know, Eagle Rare, Weller, Fireball, God, Southern Comfort, God help us, Traveler, Southern Comfort, Buzzballs. Did you know that? Buzzballs. Svedka Vodka. We've got some of that upstairs. Wheatley Vodka. We do not have any of that upstairs. Myers Rum. Don't drink rum. Paddy's Irish Whiskey. And they've got hundreds of other spirits sold around the world. So a bit of history here. Love history on the show, right? Sazerac was founded, and I didn't know this. This is something I learned doing my research today. I knew they'd been around a while. I knew they'd been down in New Orleans there. I figured a couple hundred years, right? Sazerac was founded more than 400 years ago, and it's still family owned. It's now one of the largest distilled spirits companies on the planet, with over 500, and I just listed a bunch of those brands, right? 550 brands in its global portfolio. And this Midnight Moon partnership is just the latest example of how the company continues to expand its footprint, brand by brand, and category by category. Now, I feel like at this point, keeping track of who Sazerac distributes, owns, or partners with is starting to feel less like industry news and more like a geography lesson, guys. It's like trying to keep up with all the folks being added to the blessed Kentucky Bourbon Trail. And that's a whole nother story. I don't know that I'm going to touch that one. I might. If you haven't heard, they've added even more. They've added even more to the... Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. Either way, Midnight Moon's what I'm talking about here. It's now officially part of the ever-growing Sazerac portfolio. And as always, I'll keep my finger on the pulse, and I'll let you know if I hear any more news on Sazerac, basically controlling the entire universe. And now, speaking of the Bourbon Trail, see how I segued there? Here's a Bourbon Trail pro tip that'll keep everybody happy when you hit the Bourbon Trail. Well, with the wife in particular, guys. Now, you can sleep where history and whiskey was made. It's pretty cool here. You want to hit the Bourbon Trail, right? And she basically wants to go to a historic bed and breakfast, right? Well, problem solved here. say hello to the Ashbrook Hotel in Frankfort, Kentucky. It's Colonel E.H. Taylor's old stomping ground. And after 4 years of TLC, that means they renovated it, this 200-year-old home now has 14 rooms, a full bar, and a restaurant serving up Southern comfort classics. They say historic charm is everywhere. Original fireplaces, leaded glass, detailed wainscoting, and even the restored Queen on the Corner crown over the front entrance. You can grab the Grand King Suite with its private balcony. You can sip a rare bourbon at the Walnut Front Bar or wander the courtyard with fire pits and lawn games. It sounds really amazing, right? It's kind of a win-win. They say it's the ultimate Bourbon Trail hack. You get your whiskey, the history buffs get their fix, everyone leaves happy. And the bonus? You can actually buy rare bottles right on site. You're going to get history, you're going to get whiskey, a little luxury, and basically, guys, that's going to satisfy your entire crew in one stop. You're welcome. So, I asked y'all on social media. Oh, no! Yeah, I know, big groan, right? I braved Al Gore's amazing internet just long enough to ask one simple question, and somehow it turned into a full-on bourbon bloodbath. I asked you all on Facebook and Instagram, and you should follow me on Facebook and Instagram. A lot of you follow me on Instagram. The numbers are really jumping on Instagram. Facebook, and I guess Facebook is Facebook. It's not really going away, right? I know they're trying to shadow ban us bourbon, whiskey, alcohol related Facebook pages, but I don't know. Maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know. But Instagram blowing up pretty good. Facebook, it's okay. But it would be amazing if you're on Facebook, follow Instagram, and vice versa, if you don't mind. Anyway, I asked you all on Facebook and Instagram. That's a squirrel moment, guys. One has to go. I said, no, nobody's sitting on the fence. No, it just depends on the day or it depends on the weather. I said, one absolutely has to go. And I wanted you to pick your least favorite bourbon and explain yourself. And y'all really showed up. You showed up loud. You showed up proud. You what they say, you showed up and you showed out. And honestly, some of these answers, they were pretty rough. And I'm going to run through these real quick, guys. I don't want to bore you with it, but I found it fascinating. And one of the things I really love about the podcast is, yeah, I give you my crazy opinions, right? My ideas and my tasting notes and all those good things. But at the same time, I want to hear from you guys. It helps me to actually plan the pod and to get an idea for what you guys are looking for, what's missing out there that maybe I can fill that gap. At any rate, this is one of those situations where I got a ton of feedback from you guys, and I really appreciate that. So here were the contenders. There were 4 of them. Blanton's, just the regular Blanton's. Weller Antique 107, Eagle Rare 10, and Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. And I didn't specify which barrel proof, which one of the many they put out every year. I just said Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. Let me get a sip of coffee. Hang on. Okay. Now, arguably, at least in my mind, we all know these ones, right? That's one of the reasons I picked these 4. Nobody's like, oh, I've never heard of Eagle Rare before. No, everybody knows what this stuff is. And these are real players in the bourbon world. And they're pretty gettable for the most part. You could argue that Blanton's and Eagle Rare and Weller Antique are more difficult to get your hands on, but I've seen them more now than ever before. And that's another reason why they're part of this 4 choices. But they're 4 very different personalities, and you could only pick one. Now, let's get into how this actually shook out, guys. This was no surprise to me. Blanton's took the biggest hit by a wide margin, and roughly 55% of the vote said, bye, see you later to the horsey bottle. You were done with it, right? And your main complaints about Blanton's were all the hype. The low proof at just 93. Some people wouldn't say that's low, but I would. And a finish, you guys said, just kind of kind of checks out early. Again, not untrue. And the consensus really was that it's not bad, but that it doesn't live up to what people went through to get it, right? You run the gauntlet sometimes to get Blantons. You drop stupid money, and the payoff, it could be a letdown, right? Just be honest. Now, Eagle Rare 10, and I was specific to say Eagle Rare 10. It came in second place with about, and this was a shock to me, it came in with 21% of the votes said, of these four, get rid of this one. People called it safe, tame, and a little too close to other Buffalo Trace offerings. Also, people said it wasn't exciting. Okay, fine. Now, moving on to Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. It only caught about 9% of the votes. And most of the criticism about Elijah Craig Barrel Proof wasn't about the flavor in particular. It was about the inconsistency in the flavor. And I think that's a fair point. Some batches are legendary. Others feel like they're yelling at you for no reason. Sometimes they're just too damn hot. Inconsistency. That is the word, the takeaway from y'all's voting. 9% against Elijah Craig Barrel Proof to vote it off the island. And then there's my favorite out of this bunch, Weller Antique 107. It got one vote. That's it. Not going to name the person, but one person of all the replies I got, and I got a ton of replies, a lot of replies, one person voted it off the island. Weller Antique 107 did not take any fire, did not take any flack. Just this one dude, he says bye-bye to the Wellers. So yeah, Blanton's got voted off the planet. That wasn't even close. And I've given you the breakdown on the other ones too. I want to talk about some of the comments in particular. And I'm going to be quick with this, guys. I'm not trying to belabor this, but some of these were interesting and some of them were insightful. You may not have time to sit here and look at social media all day long. Well, we're riding in your car, you can listen to me tell you about it. Now, my favorite, authentic, and most thoughtful idea came from Tyler. Not going to give his last name. He knows who he is. And he totally nailed it when he said Blanton's, his quote was, Blanton's is approachable and well-made, but lighter and less complex when stacked against the others. He said when you put it next to 107's punch, Eagle Rare's balance, and Elijah Craig Barrel Proof's intensity, it just doesn't wow. Another dude, Kevin, he went full bourbon accountant here and said Blanton's has no reason to exist when Eagle Rare is older and arguably just as good for half the price. And you're only giving up, he said, you're only giving up a couple of proof points. And that's like actual science. And that's facts. And I respect that like a ton. So thank you for that comment, Kevin. Fair points. But the best summation here is about Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. And it comes from our good friend Brian. And he called it and I'm going to steal this, he called it the roller coaster bourbon. And Brian, I am going to steal that, my brother. Roller coaster bourbon. That is epic. I don't know where you got that from. You made it up. That's amazing. I will credit you, Brian. Hereforth and going forward, Brian has deemed Elijah Craig Barrel Proof the roller coaster bourbon. He said sometimes it's incredible, sometimes it's just loud, but you keep buying tickets every time because it hits how many times a year? And sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. So it's either hit or miss. Then you all got crazy. Dude named Mike said, "Bye, horsey. I've had better $25 bottles." And here's one that's not crazy. It's actually insightful. And I got to be honest with you. Sharing tasting notes here, and I mentioned this earlier, right? Your ideas, asking questions. This is the right place for it. So Rob and Jen said, pre-COVID Blanton's was better. Okay, interesting take. And they said gold and straight from the barrel are beasts. But standard Blantons today just doesn't hit the same. So they would vote it off the island. All very interesting insights into, I'm going to be honest with you, I do have some pre-COVID Blantons here in the house and some, well, no, during COVID. I don't think I have any post-COVID. I don't buy a lot of Blantons, right? I've got a little bit of gold left from, and straight from the barrel from my last review, or from reviews a few weeks ago. But I don't buy Blantons. There's so much stuff out there. Again, I don't think there's anything out there for $25 that you could set against Blanton's. Maybe, and if you can, let me know what it is, guys. Appreciate that. But I don't buy Blanton's. I don't see any reason to. I've got a couple bottles here in the house. I don't see any reason to buy. So I can't compare pre-COVID Blanton's with post-COVID, like, the new normal, right? I don't know. But fantastic comment by Robin Chen. Amazing stuff. Thank you, guys. And then there was Scott, our old buddy Scott. The lone soul. Oh, shit. I said I wasn't going to say his name. Dude, wherever you are, I respect your bravery, but I do not respect your choice. I absolutely respect the bravery. Going out on a limb to say Weller 107, out of the 4 choices you were given, Blanton's, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, Eagle Rare 10, and 107. Respect, my guy. Respect. And about Weller 107, it didn't just survive this exercise. It thrived. And people called it the perfect balance of flavor, proof, and consistency. They did not call it a symphony in your mouth, which I would call it a symphony in your mouth. Perfect balance of flavor, proof, and consistency. And one listener said they always keep a backup to a backup because it never lets them down. And honestly, I've never had a 107 to let me down either. Now here's where it got even more interesting, guys. I asked people, if you dumped one or all of these, what are you going to replace them with? And the answers, they fell into a few clear camps. First, there was the give me more proof crowd. And these folks didn't hate the bourbons as much as they hated the proof points. Their replacements were Wild Turkey Rare Breed, Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, Old Forester 1920, Knob Creek Single Barrel 120, and Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Barrel Proof. Now, these cats, their vibe was simple. If it's under 100 proof, I'm out. I'm bored. Now, next up, we get the value over hype crowd. These are the rebels, right? These people are tired. And they're tired of chasing bottles. They're tired of secondary prices. And their replacements were things like Wild Turkey 101, Evan Williams Bottled in Bond, Old Granddad 114, Early Times Bottled in Bond, and Benchmark Full Proof. And those are all solid choices, guys. But if you can get your hands on Weller Antique 107 for $59.99, there is no way that Benchmark Full Proof holds up to it, or Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. As much as I enjoy every single one I just said there. But it doesn't. Guys, come on. Now, their argument was, why pay for hype when you can buy 2 bottles that drink just as well? They weren't necessarily anti-quality. They were just anti-bullshit, right? They were anti-nonsense. And again, I can't say I agree. I mean, I do agree that you can buy 2 bottles of Wild Turkey 101 for the price of one Weller Antique 107, right? Or 3 bottles of Blanton's, but I would do the Blanton's. Weller Antique 107 for me. And I think that's one of the reasons why we got 1 vote to vote Weller off the island. All right, then you had the allocated fatigue crowd. And these folks just want to walk into a store and they want to leave with bourbon. They don't want to wait in line in the rain. They don't want to wait in the snakes. They don't want to have to bribe anybody, right? They just want to walk in the store and get what they want. And they gave shout outs to things like Maker's Mark Private Selects, which you can find more and more regularly. I picked up a Private Select Makers the other day as well. I want to talk about that real soon in an upcoming episode. They talked about Four Roses Single Barrel, which you can find pretty much everywhere. Bardstown Bourbon Company, Origin Series. I don't buy Bardstown Bourbon, but if I did, that might be a great one, right? And New Riff single barrels. And New Riff I enjoy. Those are, when you put that up against the last set of arguments, I kind of understand this, right? It's been a long day or a long week. You go to the liquor store, you don't want to have to go in the back room and wheel and deal to spend. You just want to walk in, you want to grab something off the shelf, and you want to go home. So the message here from this crowd was the allocated fatigue crowd is what I call them. Oh yeah, and Fireball. Yeah. Fireball actually got some mentions in here, guys, which I'm choosing to believe were just basically cries for help from you guys. Fireball. All right, so I think we've all already figured this out. Which bottle triggered the strongest replacement reactions? And it was Blanton's by a mile. I told you that 55% of y'all who replied to my social media post voted it off the island. Wasn't even close. And like I said, people didn't just vote it out. Y'all came in hard. You yelled about the price, the proof points, daily drinkers that beat it, all that stuff. And I respect that. Thank you. A lot of shrapnel hit Blanton's. A lot of shrapnel. Eagle Rare, and this blew me away because Eagle Rare 10 got absolutely wrecked here on this, and that really surprised me because I enjoy Eagle Rare 10 for what it is. And again, at MSRP, I have several bottles here at the house. MSRP, yeah, you could have it as a daily drinker. And get this, even when I asked if it was Eagle Rare 12 year, if that would make the cut, if we could keep it on the island, y'all said no. No, absolutely not. Just Eagle Rare, out. You're gone. Now, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof got respect, but it was mixed, like I said before, with some understandable fear. And Weller's got defended like Fort Knox. And I understand that. I really didn't know how this would shake out, guys. But that's the takeaway here. This wasn't just a popularity contest. It was proof to me that y'all whiskey freaks, you bourbon drinkers, you're thinking hard about this. I mean, why not? With the environment that we're in now, with the choices that we have, you're thinking about value, you're thinking about consistency, and what actually is going to end up in your glass. It was an epic battle, guys, and y'all showed up, and like I said, you showed out as always. So thanks again for jumping in here in this kind of experiment that I did about which of these four to vote off the island. Look, what we do here is we learn. Like I said at the beginning of every episode, we might even learn something today. And I learned a whole bunch on this one. So thanks to y'all. Okay, this is super cool to me. I'm not a fanboy, and you know that my ascot is still at the dry cleaners. But I teased this at the top of the podcast because it was kind of surreal to get to do this, and I'd be derelict in my duty here on the pod if I didn't share it with y'all. And for those of you with infinity bottles, that means I'd be a dumbass. Well, I was honored the other night to be part of Fred Minnick. So the second, I think it was the second night of his book tour and his book release. All right, whiskey freaks, let's be real. This podcast ain't free to make. And my wife, well, she's got questions about where all the money's going. So if you've ever enjoyed an episode here on the Blind Tasting Podcast and thought, man, this guy deserves a drink, well, now here's your chance. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/blindtastingpodcast. Toss a few bucks in the tip jar. It'll keep the podcast rolling, and it helps me prove to my wife that somebody out there thinks this was a good idea. Thanks for the support, whiskey freaks. That's buymeacoffee.com/blindtastingpodcast. Just a buck or two if you love what you're hearing. It's so appreciated, guys. Cheers to all of you. Now let's get back to the bourbon. And it was a bourbon tasting as well. So Fred's on a Zoom at his house. down in his basement for some reason. I thought he'd be in his office. It was weird. He was down in his basement. That's a whole another story. And there's a room full of people on one big Zoom here in St. Louis. And then there's a whole bunch of us people Zooming because we couldn't get there. We couldn't make it there in time, right? But I could jump on it at home. So I'm on Zoom at home with a whole mess of other people on Zoom for a book release party and bourbon tasting. And we're tasting, and I'm not going to get in too much into this, but it's a bottom shelf tasting. And if you know anything about Fred Minnick and his new book that's coming out, his new book is about how Old Crow basically saved his life. And Old Crow being a bottom shelfer. So you get the gist of it, right? Yeah, I get that. Yeah, Old Crow, bottom shelf, bottom shelf. So we're doing a bottom shelf tasting. I'm not going to get into what I think about how the tasting went. That's irrelevant. I might in a later episode if it's relevant. Anyway, not going to do anything today. But it's his book release, and he's doing this all over the country. And I think, like I said, we're his second stop. So pretty cool stuff, right? I've never met Fred, and I know I kind of make fun of him here sometimes. Really, I do respect the man. He's quite a special individual, and I don't mean special like the short bus. I mean he is a special bourbon and whiskey person. Very important to have Fred in the whiskey world. Anyway, very cool situation here. It was pretty awesome. And during this tasting and book release, I decided to, and I did this respectfully, guys. I respectfully asked the question right in the middle of things. Now, it wasn't right in the middle of things. We were given the opportunity because, and I'm not going to talk about how this tasting went. I have opinions and thoughts on it, but we were afforded the opportunity to ask questions pretty much anytime we wanted to. So I did. And keep in mind, Fred, he's like the god of bourbon. So I'm hoping he doesn't get pissed off and that it doesn't come off like I'm trying to be a dick or come at him, bro. You know, I don't, that's not my point here. And I'm not. But I got questions, y'all. You know that. And I wanted to know something. It's something that I'd been mulling over, and I know for a fact a lot of us regular bourbon guys are thinking this every single year when this blessed list of 100 whiskeys comes out. And I know some of y'all even messaged about it on socials. List this whole thing of the 100 list that Fred puts out. We've got questions. And my question to Fred was this. I asked him, for those of us trying to make buying decisions, does a full top 100 list actually help us? Or after the top 15 or 20, does it start to kind of blur together? I said, would a tighter list actually create more clarity for us whiskey freaks? I thought it was a pretty good question. I thought it was respectful, but poignant. I'm not going to tell you infinity bottle guys what that means. Now, first off, Fred handled it, well, he's a pro, so he handled it like a pro. So thank you, Fred. And I thanked him then as well. I know I joke about the whole ascot thing and all that good stuff, but guys, like I said, it is Fred. So he's earned a great deal of respect. And he served our country, by the way, and I respect that greatly. And that's part of what his book is about too, guys. Go buy his book, by the way. I think it's called Bottom Shelf, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to get it on Amazon here in a couple of days. But pick my book up, by the way, too. Whiskey Wisdom and Bourbon BS. Barrel Strength, Legends, Lies, and Untold Tales. So you can pick up Fred's book and my book at the same time. Why not? Anyway, I wasn't completely... He answered my question. It took him like 4 minutes to answer it. But I really, when he got done, I wasn't completely satisfied with his answer, really. And this is why. What he said was, all right, well, he talked about how he's always been fascinated with lists. He talked about the AP poll, the top 25 poll for sports, right? And he talked about Billboard's top 100 list for music. We've all heard of these lists, right? Keep in mind, and he reminded us, he came from Whiskey Advocate magazine as their lead reviewer. And so he wanted to create something uniquely his. And that's how his top 100 was born, so to speak. Like I said, it took him about 4 minutes to get there, but we meandered around, we got there. But that's it in about 10 seconds in a nutshell for you guys. And I respect his answer. First of all, I respect that he even answered that. I really do. But here's where I'm going to, and I didn't say anything else. I thanked him for his service and I thanked him for his answer. But today I'm going to poke the bear just a little bit. Keep in mind, guys, the AP poll, the top 25 ranking works because there are only like 125 or 130 Division I college football teams. And I'm just talking specifically football. I know they also do an AP and poll for basketball, but that's a different story. I think they're close to 240 teams, NCAA Division I basketball. But football, there's only like 125 or 130 teams. So to do a top 25 out of 125 or 130, okay, that's manageable, right? And then look at the Billboard Top 100 for music. Well, it works for music because there are like thousands of songs released every single year. So you're narrowing down probably 10,000 songs a year into 100. And they're broken up into different divisions, right? You've got rock, you've got pop, you've got R&B, you've got rap, you've got all kinds of different genres. But bourbon is different. When I'm standing in the aisle at the liquor store, I'm not thinking, oh, let me consult number 57 through 84 on the list. No, what I'm thinking when I'm standing in the liquor store is, do I want this bottle? Is it worth my money? And am I going to regret this purchase when my wife sees the credit card statement? Real life stuff, guys. And here's another problem with top 100 lists for us regular whiskey freaks. After about 15 or 20, just like I said in my question, the signal starts turning into noise. Let's be honest. If something is number 73 on a list of 100, unless you're a hedge fund manager, what does that actually mean to me, regular dude? Is it great? Is it good? Is it just better than 200 other things you tasted? Because when everything is top 100, nothing really feels urgent. It's like saying you're one of the top 100 guitar players in Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah, I mean, that's cool, right? But are you in the top 5? Because that's the difference between interesting and life-changing. Fred's answer, again, thank you, Fred. I do love you. I'm going to read your book. I respect you. Nobody's perfect, though, right? And Fred's answer was basically, pare it down yourself and cross off the categories you don't like. And then he said, maybe ignore, like if you don't like American single malts, ignore those that are on the list. And if you don't drink them, then filter by price, circle 1 or 2 unicorns and chase those. And I guess that's fair advice. And I appreciate that. But here's my counterpoint to that. And honestly, I didn't have the nerve to throw this back at him because I respect him and it's his book release party, right? It's his party. If I have to filter the top 100 down to a top 12 that actually is meaningful and applies to me, then maybe what I really needed was a top 15 or a top 20 to begin with. Because here's what happens in the real world. You drop a top 100 list and Instagram and all your social media crap explodes, right? People screenshot numbers 1 through 5, maybe 1 through 10. They share it with everybody. It stirs up a bunch of hype, right? And then the rest kind of fade into the whiskey ether. I mean, no one's camping out overnight we got to camp out overnight for number 91, guys. Not even if Fred says so. Nobody's texting their buddy, bro, we have to find number 82. No, nobody's doing that. Nobody. So here's my proposal. Let me get a sip of coffee. This is what I think would work better. What if we had a top 10 overall list? Let's make a top 5 under $50, for the normal guys. A top 5 over 100 for the hedge fund managers. a top 5 craft whiskeys, and a top 5 available, actually findable on shelves every day. Then I think we're talking clarity. And that makes things manageable. Yeah, you got a couple different lists, right? But they're broken out for you. It's just like Billboard does for music. Different genres. That way you can attack it from whichever angle you want. Top 5 craft, top 5 whatever. I think this type of scenario would be doable. It's achievable, and you don't have to spend all the time and money trying to complete this crazy list that's just unattainable for us guys. I don't believe the regular bourbon guy needs a spreadsheet and a decoder ring to figure out the blessed list. And I say this with all due respect because, like Fred also mentioned, I didn't mention this yet, he tastes routinely. I think last year he said he tasted 600 whiskeys in a year. And, well, that's pretty much insane, but that's what he does. And I'm not tasting 600 whiskeys a year. So I can't generate this list. I'm calling on Fred to do it, to be perfectly honest. Nobody's tasting 600 whiskeys a year but Fred Minnick. And he said he usually tastes like 1,200 whiskeys a year, but 2025 was just a slow year for him. Okay, this kind of thing, it's just impossible for us regular dudes. I mean, what? We're tasting maybe a regular, I'm not talking about some of the guys that follow hardcore, right? But most folks, what do they taste? 25 bottles a year if they're really into whiskey, 30 if they're feeling ambitious, 50 if we're like deep into the hobby and things or the enthusiasm. What are the enthusiasts that we call them? Whiskey enthusiasts, right? And even 50 starting to get a little out of hand, right, guys? Now, I'm clearly tasting a lot of whiskey for the podcast, but I don't achieve 600 tastings in a year. So for us, a top 100 can start to feel like homework, or worse yet, real work. I don't want to come home and do math. Does anybody really want to do that? Bourbon isn't supposed to feel like work, guys. It isn't supposed to feel like work at all. It's supposed to feel like discovery, like confidence, like walking into a store and knowing this one's worth it. So I'm curious, whiskey freaks. Do you really want the full top 100 experience? Is that something you just can't wait to see that every single year? What does Fred say about all of it, right? Or would you rather have a tighter list that actually helps you make a decision? Because at the end of the day, the best whiskey isn't number 1 through 100. It's not the unicorn you hunted down like D.B. Cooper, or the ones that are just gathering dust in your man cave. It's the ones you actually open. I want to give a special shout out to all you folks in Germany and, for crying out loud, Lithuania and the Netherlands and Canada. We have Canadian listeners now. After I ripped you Canadians a few episodes ago, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am glad to have y'all on board. And last but not least, guys, as always, I got to give a shout out to the farmers, the distillery production guys and gals, all the warehouse workers busting their asses, the bottlers, and the truck drivers. We love you guys. You're the ones that make it happen in the whiskey world. So cheers to all of y'all. That's all I got for today, whiskey freaks. Again, thanks for listening to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your number one attitudinal bourbon destination. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Share my posts on Facebook and Instagram. The algorithm overlords are trying to shut alcohol down. So help us out. Help share me, share the other podcasters, share Fred, buy Fred's book, buy my book, and I'll talk to you soon.